Suicide Risk Identification and Triage using the Columbia Suicide Severity Rating Scale.
We received a 911 call from a woman named Joan who said she was upset and afraid she might kill herself, so I was dispatched to her location. I've been in situations like this before where it was really hard to tell if someone was actually in danger of suicide or not. Fortunately, I was recently introduced to CSSRS, and I could use a few quick questions to help me decide what level of care she needed.
The Columbia Suicide Severity Rating Scale was developed in the context of a national effort to meet the need for a scale to better identify people at risk. Let's hear Dr. Posner explain why.
What used to happen historically is the same exact occurrence would get called 16 different things. The CSSRS specifically increases our ability to predict future risk of suicidal behavior, and it provides evidence-based information that allows the better assessment of suicidal intent and also reflects change over time. The use of the CSSRS also reduces the burden on the healthcare system by reducing unnecessary interventions and redirecting resources to those who actually need help.
Welcome to this training module, Assessment of Suicidal Risk using CSSRS. You have just heard Dr. Posner introduce the CSSRS and discuss its importance. In this module, she will also describe how the CSSRS is structured, as well as instructions for how to administer it. Throughout this module, we will use this illustration to guide you through the process of administering the CSSRS. We will describe each step in detail as it occurs. This illustration gives you an overview of the types of thoughts and behaviors you will assess with this instrument. After completing this module, you will have the information you need to administer the instrument. If you would like additional information or training about the CSSRS, you can click the resources link at the bottom of the page to learn more. A printable copy of the full and screen version are accessible through the resources icon at the bottom of the page. We encourage users to refer to the forms while viewing the module. This module will take approximately 30 minutes to complete. This time is an estimate, based on the amount of exploration you choose to do. Click Next and continue with the module. The CSSRS can be used in many settings by a wide variety of people. Click each item on the left to hear who could administer the CSSRS and in what settings. One important feature of the CSSRS is that you don't need to have any mental health training to administer it. All types of gatekeepers or professionals can actually administer this scale, and it's used by a wide variety of individuals, from high school students to clergy, and in all behavioral health care settings, such as outpatient clinics, inpatient settings, day treatment programs, emergency departments, and schools. When coordinating the care for an individual at risk for suicide, linkage of systems is essential. Using the same assessment instrument, the CSSRS, across settings will allow for quick and efficient communication. The importance of communicating the information identified by the CSSRS back to the individual's primary care physician, behavioral health provider, and others in the care network must be noted. It's very important to use this linking of systems and make sure that the information is communicated to the appropriate people. Structure of the instrument. The CSSRS is structured into two sections. There's an ideation subscale and a behavior subscale. For suicidal ideation, it defines the types of ideation of increasing severity from 1 to 5, from a wish to die through a thought with plan and intent. And then it asks about the intensity of that ideation, which we're going to get into. Suicidal behavior assesses 4 suicidal behaviors: an actual attempt, an interrupted attempt, an aborted attempt, and preparatory behavior. It provides definitions and standardized questions for each category to guide your easiest and most improved identification. How to administer the CSSRS. There are several versions of the CSSRS, which can be accessed through the resources link at the bottom of the page. Listen as Dr. Posner describes the 2 core versions she will be discussing today.
There's what we call the full version, which still takes just a few minutes typically. And what that does is assess severity of ideation as well as intensity of suicidal ideation. And also specifically assesses the presence of distinct suicidal behaviors as well as the lethality of suicide attempts. The screening version is an even shorter version that can be used by first responders, by crisis lines, whenever you need to have just whenever you only have a shorter amount of time. What that gives you is the severity of ideation and one question that compiles all of the behaviors into one screening question.
The screening version, consisting of 3 to 6 questions, assesses severity of ideation and behaviors, which are necessary for assessing emergent risk and is often used for mental status checks, shift monitoring, and when a very quick assessment is needed. The full version, which is 6 to 16 questions, gives users additional clinical information to inform their decision-making. Here's an example of how the screening version of the CSSRS might be introduced in an emergency setting. Remember, the screening version consists of the 5 suicidal ideation questions to determine the severity and 1 behavior question that combines all 4 types of behaviors.
Hi. Are you Joan?
Uh-huh.
I'm glad you called us. We're going to get you some help, okay?
Okay.
I'm going to ask you a few questions about your thoughts and behaviors over the past few weeks to help us better understand how to help you. Is that okay?
Okay. Am I going to have to go to the hospital?
Let's just get all the information about what's going on first, and then we can talk about that. All right?
Okay.
Good. Have you wished you were dead or wished you could go to sleep and not wake up?
Yeah. I wish I was dead right now.
Have you actually had any thoughts about killing yourself?
No, I would never do that.
Okay. Have you ever done anything, started to do anything, or prepared to do anything to end your life?
I mean, once when I was a teenager, I wrote a note to my friend saying I wanted to die, but nothing recently.
Okay, thanks. Let's talk about getting you some help now, okay?
You just saw a police officer using the screener to determine emergent risk. He is now able to use that information to make a judgment about her safety and what to do next.
The CSSRS uses a flexible format. That means you don't have to ask any or all questions, just the amount that you need to get to the right answer. So, for example, if somebody gets asked, have you made a suicide attempt? And the person says, yes, I took 50 pills because I definitely wanted to die, you'll see in a few minutes that you'll have enough information there to check off suicide attempt on your form, and you do not need to ask any additional or unnecessary information. One of the other fundamental aspects of this scale is that it allows integration of multiple sources of information, if that informs your assessment. Now, most of the time, the good news is the person in front of you is going to give you the best insight into their suicidal feelings, but that's not always the case. Let's say a loved one brings a family member into the ER. The patient denies suicidal thoughts, but the family member shares with you that he's been talking about suicide for the past 2 weeks, wrote a note yesterday, and that's why he's here in the ER. So in this example, the information on the SSRS is provided by the loved one and not from the identified patient. First responders, teachers, peers. In Alzheimer's, it's given a lot, and there's a wide range of mental status where they actually can answer the questions, and when they get to the point where they can't, the caregiver can provide the answers.
Assessing suicidal ideation. When administering the CSSRS, begin with the suicidal ideation section. In this section are questions about ideation and the intensity of that ideation. Click the Visual Aid button to see a visual aid to assist you in administering the CSSRS.
Now, this is the core of the suicidal ideation section, again, of increasing severity from 1 to 5, beginning with a wish to die. So you ask, have you ever wished you were dead or wished you could go to sleep and not wake up? Or have you actually had any thoughts of killing yourself?
Click the No button to learn more.
If it's no to both of these questions, there are no suicidal thoughts, so you move on to behavior. Whether it's the full or the screen version, those are always the two screening questions.
Click the Yes button to learn more.
If it's yes to the second question, have you actually had any thoughts of killing yourself? Then you ask 3, 4, and 5. Have you been thinking about how you might do this? Have you had these thoughts and had some intention of acting on them? Or have you started to work out or worked out the details of how to kill yourself? Do you intend to carry out this plan? You can't have methods, intent, or a plan and intent if you don't have a thought of killing yourself. That's why 3, 4, and 5 are subcategories of 2.
Intensity of ideation. Now, Dr. Posner will describe the intensity section of the suicidal ideation subscale. Click each link to learn more.
Now, in the full version, if there is any ideation, you're going to ask a few follow-up questions only about the most severe thought they may have experienced. The most severe is clearly the highest they endorse from 1 to 5. How many times have you had these thoughts? When you have the thoughts, how long do they last? Can you stop thinking about killing yourself or wanting to die if you want to? Are there things, anyone or anything like family, religion, pain of death that stopped you from wanting to die or acting on thoughts of committing suicide? And finally, what sorts of reasons did you have for thinking about wanting to die or killing yourself? Was it to end the pain or stop the way you were feeling? In other words, you couldn't go on living with this pain or how you were feeling. Or was it to get attention, revenge, or a reaction from others, or both? And we know if somebody says it was to stop or end the pain, that's more serious than otherwise. So if they have more frequency, longer duration, less control, fewer deterrents, and it's to stop or end the pain, that tells you something about the severity or the intensity of their ideation. Now, these answers get added up on a range from 2 to 25. There's no cutoff, but clearly a 24 tells you something worse about a person's severity than a 2.
Watch now how the ideation severity section is administered.
So tell me, what brings you to see me today?
I've been feeling kind of crummy, problems with my family, and things at work aren't going so well.
Have you been feeling depressed?
No, I've been crying a lot, and it's hard to get out of bed in the morning. I guess you could say I'm depressed.
I see. So tell me, over the last month, have you wished you were dead or wished that you could go to sleep and not wake up?
Sometimes I think things would be better if I were dead.
I understand. But do you actually wish you were dead or want to be dead?
Now and then, yeah.
And have you actually had any thoughts of killing yourself?
Yeah.
And have you been thinking about how you might kill yourself?
Sometimes I think about jumping in front of a train or a bus.
But you wouldn't really do that, though.
No way. No way.
See how asking the wrong question can shut down the conversation? Watch now how asking the right questions using the prompts on the CSSRS can get you more accurate information.
Sometimes I think that I'll jump in front of a train or a bus.
Have you had these thoughts and had some intention of acting on them?
Yeah.
Can you tell me a little more about that?
Last week I really wanted to do it, but I chickened out.
Okay, so have you started to work out or worked out the details of how to kill yourself?
No, nothing specific.
Thank you for being so honest with me.
Thank you.
So in the example you just saw, the answer circled would be a 4, intent only, not intent and a specific plan. In this next example, a 5 would be indicated. Watch.
Sometimes I think that I'll jump in front of a train or a bus.
Well, have you had these thoughts and had some intention of acting on them?
Yeah.
Can you tell me a little more about that?
Last week I really wanted to do it, but I chickened out.
Okay, so have you started to work out or worked out the details of how to kill yourself?
Yes, I got a subway schedule, and I saw that there's a station that between 7 and 8 o'clock at night, there aren't many people there, and that's what I was going to do.
Well, do you intend to carry out this plan now?
I worry that I might.
Okay. Thank you for being so honest with me. We're going to get you some help right now.
Thank you.
You see, it would be a 5 because he had intent and a specific plan with the intent to act on it, all the details worked out, etc.
How to administer the CSSRS Suicidal Behavior section. We have already seen how to administer the first section of the CSSRS, Suicidal Ideation. Now we will look at the second section, Suicidal Behavior. Many of the questions in this section are designed to interpret whether a particular behavior is an actual suicide attempt. Definition of a suicide attempt. Definition of a suicide attempt. In order to determine if suicidal behavior constitutes an actual suicide attempt, it is necessary to understand the very specific definition.
The definition is a self-injurious act committed with at least some intent to die as a result of the act. First of all, it says self-injurious act. It does not say self-injury. There does not have to be any injury or harm, just the potential for it. So if a man puts a gun in his mouth and he pulls the trigger, and luckily the gun failed to fire, even though he wasn't hurt, as soon as he pulled that trigger, that became a suicide attempt. And then it says, very importantly, with at least some intent to die, with some being the key word. When people are feeling suicidal, they often have mixed motives. It just has to be that any part of them was doing this to end their life for us to call it a suicide attempt. So if 2% of them was engaging in this behavior to kill themselves and 98% wanted to make their boyfriend angry, that's what it gets called. And it used to be we were trained to ask, did you want to kill yourself? The answer would be no, and we'd move on. Very often with that second question, did any part of you want to kill yourself? You get a very different answer. And then it says, as a result of the act. That means the behavior and the intent must be connected. And we can also infer intent clinically from behavior or circumstance. One way we can do that is if someone denies they were trying to kill themselves, but they thought it could have killed them, or that it was lethal. Another way is what we call clinically impressive circumstances. That's a highly lethal act where no other intent but suicide can be inferred, like trying to shoot oneself in the head, or jumping from a 9th story, or setting herself on fire, or taking 300 pills. No matter what they say, you can't infer anything but suicidal intent. A real case we heard about recently was a military example. A man shot himself in the face, and he survived. And when he woke up in the military hospital the next day, the provider said if we had relied on our standard questions, were you trying to kill yourself? He said no. If we didn't have the luxury of inference from the SSRS, this man who shot himself in the face would not have had a suicide attempt indicated on his record. So that inference can be very, very helpful and important.
Inferring intent.
Now you'll notice on the full version, the attempt section is the only one with multiple questions. And again, you don't have to ask any or all questions, just what you need. So if you say, have you made a suicide attempt? And the person says, yes, I took 50 pills because I wanted to die, you have enough information. You don't need to ask one additional question. But if you look at that last indented question on the bottom, it says, or did you think it was possible you could have died from? Remember, if they deny intent, you can infer it if they thought it could have killed them. So The scale gives you all the tools you may need to get to the right answer. Most of the time you're going to stop at the first or second question, but when that question is needed, it's there for you to use as a way to get the right answer.
Non-suicidal self-injurious behavior.
Now what we're doing is distinguishing suicide attempts from non-suicidal self-injurious behavior. That's when someone engages in the behavior purely 100% for reasons other than to end one's life. What we think of as self-mutilation, that's to feel better, relieve internal pain, feel something, or what we call affecting external circumstances. That's the homeless person that wants food and shelter. That's the man who goes up to the roof because he believes people will feel sorry for him. If they think he's suicidal, he actually has no intention of ending his life. He just wants to get sympathy from others. Well, if that man accidentally fell to his death, theoretically, that's just what we would call it, an accidental death, because there was no suicidal intent associated with it. Now, on the bottom of that section, you see there's a place to indicate non-suicidal self-injurious behavior. That's very important for a few reasons. First of all, it gives you credit for having appropriately assessed something and ruling it out. If that weren't there, for the non-suicidal examples, it would just be nose down the page. It wouldn't be reflected that you asked the right questions and decided that something shouldn't be called suicidal. The other reason is it's actually an important risk factor, and it's nice for a medical or mental health professional to have that information as part of the information that gets communicated about somebody's risk.
Other suicidal behaviors.
Now, in addition to actual suicide attempts, there are other behaviors that are also very important to assess. They just don't reach the threshold of an actual attempt. And one of the reasons we actually first created this scale was to assess the full range of behavior for the first time. It used to be that somebody was asked only about a suicide attempt, and then you miss the person that bought the gun yesterday, or put the noose around their neck and changed their mind, or wrote the suicide note. Things we absolutely cannot afford to miss. And now the science is also confirming that. We have evidence showing that each one of these behaviors is actually equally predictive to a suicide attempt. So we know we need to ask about these things. The first one is called an interrupted attempt. That's when a person starts to take steps to end their life, but someone or something stops them. So he's on the ledge poised to jump. The policeman grabs him back. She has a gun in her hand. Somebody grabs it out of her hand. An aborted attempt is exactly the same thing, but they stop themselves. He goes up to the roof, he turns around and changes his mind. She has a gun in her hand, she puts it down. He plans to drive his car off the road at high speed. On the way to the destination, he turns around and changes his mind. And the final category of behavior is a preparatory behavior. That's any other behavior with suicidal intent. Collecting or buying pills, purchasing a gun, writing a will or suicide note. And the question on the form is, have you taken any steps towards making a suicide attempt or preparing to kill yourself, such as collecting pills, getting a gun, giving valuables away, or writing a suicide note? So the very examples are in the question for you to ask the person in front of you. In the screener version, all of these behaviors are addressed, but they're just compiled into one screening question. Because again, even in screening, we need to make sure that we don't miss any very important behavior. There was one very poignant example. I was training a VA system, and they hadn't introduced the SSRS yet, and they talked about their recent suicide. And when this man died, they realized upon his death that he was putting clothes in bags and labeling them for different charities, stockpiling food for his pet, 6 months of preparations. And they realized that, remember that's a question on the form, a preparatory behavior. They realized that if they had been asking the questions, they would have had a better chance of saving this man's life. Now, in the full version, there's also a lethality item, and this is a compilation of the Beck Medical Lethality Rating Scale. It's a 0 through 5, and what we answer this based on is if there's any medical damage, we answer it in terms of what actually happened in terms of medical damage. Not what could have happened or should have happened, but what actually happened. It's a 0 through 5. 0 is no physical damage or very minor physical damage, e.g. surface scratches. So even a surface scratch can be a 0. 4 is severe physical damage, medical hospitalization, because we're talking about medical damage here, not psychiatric. But to circle the right answer on this question, you might need to ask one or two open-ended questions. So for example, if they cut, did it require a Band-Aid or a bandage? Did it bleed a little or profusely? Again, to be able to circle the right answer. Now, if there is no medical damage, then you answer one question about potential lethality. Like the gun that failed to fire, there was no medical damage. And this is a range of 0 to 2, 2 being death would have happened no matter what if medical intervention had not happened. So the gun that failed to fire, if the gun had not failed to fire, likely they would have died no matter what.
Your turn to determine which actions qualify as a suicide attempt and which do not. Click any photo to begin, then continue until you have selected all 5. Caitlin wanted to escape her mother's home. She researched lethal doses of ibuprofen, then took 6 pills, and she said she felt certain that this was not enough to kill her. She stated she did not want to die, only to escape from her mother's home. She was taken to the emergency room, where her stomach was pumped, and she was admitted to the psych ward. Was this a suicide attempt? Select the correct answer, then click Submit. Correct. This was not a suicide attempt because Caitlin said she had no desire to die. Since she chose a method that she knew would not be lethal and had 0 desire to die, this was not a suicide attempt. Listen now as Dr. Posner explains further.
We should not call that a suicide attempt, and there are a few important things to note about this case. All over this girl's record, it said suicide attempt. It wasn't until somebody took the time to ask the question why, one tiny little question, why did you do it, that we got better, more reliable information. And we think this will always be the case. The other thing is she also had suicide attempts. This was a psychotic adolescent, and she was very able to say, on these occasions I wanted to kill myself, but here I definitely didn't. I wanted to get out of my abusive mother's home. And the point is, you have to assess each occurrence independently and not assume if one thing was suicidal that the next thing will be, because they come together in the same people. And it's very important to know the number. You know, we know that people who have more behaviors indicated on the SSRS are actually at higher risk. So the number 3 versus 1 makes a difference in terms of what it tells you about a person's risk.
After a fight with her boyfriend, Marta felt like she wanted to die. She took a kitchen knife and made a superficial scratch to her wrist. Before she punctured the skin or bled, she changed her mind and stopped. Was this a suicide attempt? Select the correct answer, then click Submit. Correct. This was a suicide attempt. As soon as Marta made the first scratch, it became a suicide attempt. Andrew was feeling ignored. He went into the kitchen where his mother and sister were talking. He took a knife out of the drawer and made a cut on his arm. Andrew denied that he wanted to die at all, not even a little, but just wanted them to pay attention to him. Was this a suicide attempt? Select the correct answer, then click Correct. This is not a suicide attempt because Andrew did not want to die, not even a little. Patrick cut his wrists after an argument with his girlfriend. Was this a suicide attempt? Select the correct answer, then click Correct. We do not have enough information to determine if this was indeed a suicide attempt. Emily had a big fight with her ex-husband about her stepson, then took 15 to 20 imipramine tablets and went to bed. She slept all night and until 5 p.m. the next day, when she was unable to stand up or walk. She called EMS and was taken to the emergency room, where she drank charcoal and was admitted to the hospital. She was unable to verbalize clear intent, but said she was well aware of the dangers of TCA overdose and danger of death. Was this a suicide attempt? Select the correct answer, then correct. This was a suicide attempt because you can infer intent if the individual thinks her actions could have killed her. Watch now how the behavior section is administered.
Have you made a suicide attempt in the past 3 months?
No, not really.
What do you mean by not really? Have you done anything to harm yourself?
Well, last month I took a handful of pills. Because it's like, even my parents can't see how much pain I'm in.
Did any part of you want to kill yourself? Or was it 100% to get them to pay attention to you?
I guess a little bit of me wanted to die. Either way, I would have been better off.
Were there any other times you did something like that?
No.
Okay, I see. And in the past 3 months, have you ever started to do something to end your life? But someone or something stopped you before you actually did anything?
A friend of mine took a bottle of pills from me because I was thinking about taking them.
Was there any other time that happened?
No.
Okay. And has there been a time when you started to do something to try to end your life, but you stopped yourself before you actually did anything?
No. Not that I can remember.
Have you taken any steps toward making a suicide attempt? Or preparing to kill yourself, such as collecting pills or getting a gun, giving valuables away, writing a suicide note?
I wrote a note to my friend telling her that she could have my CD collection if anything ever happened to me.
Is that the only thing you've done like that?
This one time, I put a bottle of pills underneath my pillow. You know, just in case.
So, just those 2 times?
Yes.
Thanks. I appreciate how honest you've been. So, when you took the pills, what happened after that? Did you go to a hospital? Did you seek medical attention?
Well, they were just vitamin pills. So no, I didn't get any medical attention.
I see. Thank you. Let's see if we can get you some help.
Thanks.
Examples: suicide attempt or not.
Now, one of the reasons we created this scale was actually to identify the full range of behavior for the first time. We used to just ask about suicide attempts, and then you miss the person that bought the gun yesterday, or put the noose around their neck and changed their mind, or wrote the suicide note. Things we absolutely cannot afford to miss. And when you just saw somebody doing the behavior questions, it became very clear why it is so important to be asking the questions about all of these different behaviors. Because without asking those questions, we wouldn't be able to find out about all of these critical and very risky suicidal behaviors that people engage in. Again, we should be asking these questions the way we monitor for blood pressure, the full range, so we can better identify the people at highest risk. The patient experienced heartbreak over the loss of a guy. She took 4 clonazepam, called the girlfriend and talked her, cried it out. She was dismissive of its seriousness, but indicated that she wanted to die at the time she took the overdose. Now, what would we call that? An attempt, interrupted, or aborted?
That is a suicide attempt.
Exactly an attempt. As soon as that first pill was swallowed, that became a suicide attempt. During pill count, the study staff discovered that 6 tablets were missing. Upon questioning, the patient admitted she was saving them up so she could take them all together at a later time in order to kill herself. Would we call that interrupted, aborted, or preparatory behavior?
That would be a preparatory behavior.
Exactly, a preparatory behavior. That's the very example in the question. The patient reported that he first started thinking about killing himself when he was 12. He thought about how easy it would be to pretend to fall in front of a bus before it was able to stop so that it would look like an accident. Although he thought about it often, he said he didn't have the courage to do it. Now, what would we call that? A preparatory behavior, ideation with a plan, or ideation with a method?
I think that's ideation with a method.
Ideation with a method. This is not a plan yet. A plan would be next Tuesday at 3 o'clock, I'm going to go into my mother's medicine cabinet when I know she's going to be away at the office so she can't come home to stop me. A plan is what, where, when, and how.
Time frames for using the CSSRS. Both the full and screening versions of the CSSRS have forms available with the standard lifetime recent and since last visit timeframes. However, timeframes are flexible and can be amended depending on clinical needs.
The first time you're seeing a client or a person, we typically do what we call the lifetime recent. Now, it used to be that people thought that what you want to find out about, most importantly, is what happened recently with somebody. But actually, Beck showed many years ago that the most clinically meaningful time was the time somebody was feeling the most suicidal, even if it happened 20 years ago, much more predictive than current. So what we get here is both. For ideation, you ask about the time somebody was feeling the most suicidal, and then how about the last month for the recent time frame. For behavior, it's how many lifetime occurrences they've ever had, and then how about the last 3 months, which we think the evidence says is the most clinically meaningful time frame.
So for the lifetime assessment of ideation severity, you are asking about the single time in someone's life that they felt most suicidal, whenever that may have been. Then, for the recent time frame, you are finding out the highest level of ideation reached among all instances in the past month. Both columns could be describing the same event as there is overlap in the time frames. Behavior is assessed as the total number of behaviors in each of the 2 time periods, lifetime and the past 3 months, which overlap.
And then, every time somebody's seen after that, whether it's 6 hours, 6 weeks, or 6 months, they can do the since last visit version. Since I last saw you, what's happened? Have you had any of these thoughts or done any of these things? And we actually recommend that this really is at every visit, because God forbid the time you needed to ask is the time you didn't ask. And when you think about it, the screen version can be just a few questions, so the cost-benefit really points to the need for asking at every visit.
The since last visit form is very flexible and can be adjusted to your clinical needs.
In a behavioral health or chemical dependency practice, there are certain times when you might typically use the CSSRS. Your role and responsibilities will determine which version to use, but the following provides some examples of when you might use lifetime recent and when you might use since last visit. Intake, you want to use lifetime recent. That provides a full clinical picture. Every visit, you can ask questions using the time frame since your last visit. Whenever there's been a significant stressor, unscheduled, loss of a job, relationship, or loved one, then you can do another SSRS. And whenever it's deemed appropriate for settings which frequent client contact, day programs, ACT teams, residential programs, you can use judgment about when it's indicated, or as an agency or state policy dictates.
Next steps.
One of the greatest contributions of the CSSRS is that it has operationalized criteria for next steps to guide your clinical judgment. And what that's doing is having impact on care delivery and service utilization. So these next steps are, whatever the next steps are, specific parameters for triggering referrals to a mental health professional, triggering referrals to different levels of care. And specifically, what these parameters are is for ideation a 4 or 5 in the past month, or any of the 4 behaviors in the last 3 months. The difference between a 3 and a 4 is a 3 is I could take pills, I could jump off the bridge, but I'd never do anything about it. When you get to a 4, they say, I can't tell you if I'm going to do something about it. You have some indication of suicidal intent, and we know that the risk doubles when you get to that answer. And again, or any behavior, any of those 4 behaviors in the past 3 months, those 2 things indicate imminent risk, we believe. Here's an example of one system that, this is the electronic medical record from New York State Office of Mental Health. And the SSRS has been built into the EMR for New York State. But what you can see here is when you get one of those worrisome answers, a 4 or 5 in the past month or a behavior in the last 3 months, the big red suicide alert arrows go off. And that information, not only does the SSRS travel with the patient or the individual, but so does this risk or triaging alert history. And this is how it looks in any other system, from an army base to outpatient behavioral care. These answers are associated with the highest level of triaging or alert.
Click the button if you want to learn more about the impact on care delivery and service, or click Next to continue.
So suicidal issues are one of our greatest public health areas of concern. And it's something that we all struggle with in practice, whether you're a provider in an inpatient unit or a first responder or somebody on a crisis line. And what we've struggled with in the past is having the right language, having the right questions to ask to figure out whether somebody is really at greatest risk, whether we need to intervene with them or not. So what the SSRS gives you is the right questions, we believe, that will enable us to have a meaningful common language so we can communicate from provider to provider, we can communicate across settings. And these questions and items on the scale are helping us to better identify those at greater risk. And in turn, that's helping us redirect resources. It's reducing unnecessary interventions while helping us identify, again, those that we actually need to care for. So it gives us a common language, and it also gives us a tool to improve our care delivery and our service utilization. The fact is, we know that 50% of people who die by suicide have seen their primary care doctor the month before they die. We should be asking these questions the way we monitor for blood pressure. The more we do it everywhere by everybody all the time, the more we're going to have a chance of reducing the suicide rate.
Thank you for completing this module, Assessment of Suicidal Risk using CSSRS. In this module, you have been introduced to the CSSRS and have seen that it can be used in many settings by a variety of people. You have learned the key concepts that led to the development of the instrument. And you have learned how to administer the CSSRS. If you're interested in additional resources to learn more about the CSSRS, please click the Resources link at the bottom of the page. On the following page is an evaluation